All right, let's just tackle this head on. It's one of the most difficult, most uncomfortable parts of the entire Bible, right? How can the God who commands, total destruction in the Old Testament be the very same God who shows up as Jesus and tells us to love our enemies? Is this a story of genocide or is it divine judgment? Let's get into it and find the answer.
This is the core tension, isn't it? You have this idea of a God of infinite love on one hand, and then a divine warrior ordering conquest on the other. I mean, it honestly feels like we're talking about two completely different beings, like a split personality in the sky. So how in the world do we reconcile these two pictures?
And this slide just puts the problem in the starkest terms possible. To Joshua, the command is absolute: conquer, destroy. Then you hear Jesus, and the command is the polar opposite: love, pray. One voice commands the sword, and the other commands sacrifice. It really feels like an impossible contradiction.
But here's the absolute bedrock principle we have to start with. Jesus is not a different God. The central claim of Christianity is that he is the God of the Old Testament, just revealed in human form. His character doesn't change. The God who judged evil back then still judges evil now. So if God hasn't changed, something else must have.
And that's the question that unlocks everything. If the person of God is the same, but the actions look so radically different, what's the variable here? What is the missing piece of the puzzle?
The answer is actually really simple, but it changes everything. The mission changed. The sword of judgment was put in the hands of one nation for a very specific, temporary moment in history. And that moment, it's over. That mission is complete.
Okay, so first things first, we have to read this stuff in its own context. As scholars like Copen and Longman have pointed out, the language of utterly destroy was super common war rhetoric back then in the ancient Near East. It was just a standard, over-the-top way of saying, hey, we want a huge, decisive victory. It wasn't meant to be a literal, forensic report. And the Bible itself actually confirms this. It lists plenty of Canaanites who were still living in the land right after these battles supposedly wiped everyone out.
Now, what's really fascinating here is how this lays out that change in mission so clearly. Ancient Israel was a single nation, a literal army, given a unique one-time task to be the physical tool of God's judgment in a specific land. The church, on the other hand, is not a nation. It's a global family, right? A diverse group of people. We don't conquer cities, we carry a message. The roles are just fundamentally completely different.
So here's the key takeaway. God's justice is the constant. His opposition to evil never, ever wavers. But the historical moment and the job of his people within that moment, that's what has radically changed. Same justice, different moment. Let's zoom out and look at the timeline to see how this all fits into one big story. The conquest wasn't some surprise attack. It came after a 400-year age of patience. It was a moment of temporal judgment, kind of like a preview, but it was always pointing forward to the main event, the cross. And the cross is what kicks off the age of mercy that we're in right now, all before a final, ultimate judgment. And this brings us to the great reversal, the pivot point of all of history. Theologian Chris Wright puts it perfectly. In the story of Joshua and the conquest, judgment falls on the guilty, but at the cross, the whole logic gets flipped on its head. The judgment for all human sin, past, present, and future, falls on the one innocent person, God himself. And this is how the whole method of victory got completely transformed. Joshua wins by raising a sword against his enemies. Jesus wins by stretching out his hands on a cross for his enemies. The mission literally shifted from physical conquest to sacrificial love. And it's because of that sacrifice that the final judgment is on hold. The cross kicked the door open to this present age we're in, this open-ended time of mercy. It's a pause in the story, and it creates the space for an invitation to go out to the entire world.
So let's circle all the way back to our starting question, but now with all this context. Was the conquest of Canaan a story of arbitrary, violent genocide? Or was it a very specific act of judgment that sits inside a much, much larger story of mercy? The answer is, it's really two things at once. First, it's a terrifying warning. It's like a distant storm on the horizon, a reminder that God's justice is real and that evil will not go on forever. There are consequences. But second, and this is crucial, it's a profound invitation. The very fact that the kind of judgment we see in Canaan is now on hold is the good news. It is an act of incredible mercy, a hand reaching out, offering everyone a way to be safe before the story reaches its final chapter. So you see, it's not about two different gods or two stories that are at war with each other. It's one story told in two parts.
The conquest of Canaan shows that God's justice is real and serious, and the cross of Christ shows that God's mercy is completely available. You really need both parts to understand the whole picture.
And that leaves us with this one last, really powerful thought. This story isn't over. And you are living in this time of mercy before the final chapter is written. The only question left is, what will you do with this time?